Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this stream on YouTube or on Rumble. If you've been following my analysis in the past 2 weeks, I've been warning about the possible Israeli expansion of the war to Syria. And I tried to explain multiple times that Israel sees Syria as a war-torn country, and if they want to isolate Hezbollah after their repeated attempts to occupy parts of southern Lebanon, which were all failed, they could try to destabilize the situation in Syria in order to cut the supply lines for Hezbollah. And in this case, I have made a short video the other day for Hupu Hub platform, and I explained my opinion about it. In this live streaming, we're going to discuss together how Israel is changing its strategy in Lebanon and what does possibly mean for Syria itself. Because if the Israelis are going to change their strategy in Lebanon after the repeated attempts to occupy territories and losing many of their Merkavas, they could try to reshuffle their strategy for the same in order to reach the outcome, and that is killing the supply lines of Hezbollah and eventually strangle the Lebanese group. And what could happen next? Hezbollah could be over without the supply lines from Syria and the expertise and the military supply lines from the Syrian territories, right? This is something that is very important for the people to understand, because in the past 10 years to 14 years, there was a big misconception about the Syrian war, why it started, and what were the main objectives of the Syrian war, and why the Syrian role in the struggle of power against Israel was not really being taken into the calculations of most of the analysts, including the ones who claim to be supporting the Palestinians, and they have been misled, and they themselves sometimes they have been circulating the same talking points of the mainstream media without taking into consideration the major role of Syria in the Arab-Israeli conflict and how Syria has become a supply line for Hezbollah, and Hezbollah delivers some of these weapons to the Palestinians in Gaza, in addition to the territory of Syria that has been considered the strategic depth for what is called the axis of resistance. So I made a short video for Hupo. Let's first watch this video together, and I will tell you in some details the strategy shift of Israel in the region, including in Palestine, in Lebanon, and why they could be eyeing on Syria. Take a look. Israel claims that its war of aggression against the Palestinians and the Lebanese are only intended at destroying Hezbollah and Hamas. Then why the Israeli occupation forces are bombing Syria, you may ask? Israel accelerated its bombing campaign against Syria, especially against civilian infrastructure and civilian neighborhoods in Damascus, in order to trigger a military response from the Syrian army and expand the war to Syria. Again, why? Because after the October 7 event, Hezbollah intervened in support of the Palestinians and imposed an equation on the Israelis, saying that when you stop your acts of hostilities and the extermination of the Palestinians in Gaza, then I will stop shooting on your settlements. So there was a military equation established and imposed by Hezbollah itself, and the Israelis aren't happy about it. So they want to change this equation by saying, look, Syria is a war-torn country. There has been 14 years of war. Its economy is devastated, and we know that Syria is the lifeline route of many Lebanese people. So I'm going to expand the war to Syria and provoke the Syrian army to respond and open an all-out war against Syria. So Israel is threatening to expand the war to Syria, and at the same time they want to destabilize one of the major arms of the axis of resistance, Syria, which is considered the strategic depth for the axis of resistance. And that's why the Americans and the Brits, they have intelligence assets in the Al-Qaeda-held Idlib, where around 40,000 Al-Qaeda fighters are waiting for the instructions to attack against the Syrian army forces in order to disperse the Syrian army efforts and overstretch its military capabilities in the geography of Syria. And here I want to remind you something. In 2012, Jake Sullivan, who is the current national security advisor for the Biden administration, he sent an email to his former boss, Hillary Clinton, saying in the email, quote, "Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria." So you do the math. So I apologize. I had to take my shirt. It's so warm here in my apartment at the moment. So there is going to be some shift in the Israeli strategy in the coming days, and this has been expressed by the defense minister of Israel himself. And he's at the moment he is not really satisfied with Netanyahu, and he says that Israel is conducting war without compass, needs new war goals. So the defense minister Yoav Gallant, he sent a letter basically to Benjamin Netanyahu and other members of the security cabinet, stating that the war is being conducted without a compass and that its objectives need to be updated. And this letter, a copy of this letter has been also, he also sent a copy of this letter to Shin Bet director and also the Mossad chief and the IDF chief of staff, so also the cabinet ministers. In the letter, the Gallant says that the current situation in which we operate without a valid compass and without updated war goals harms the management of the campaign and the cabinet's decisions. Significant developments in the war, primarily the exchanges of direct blows between Israel and Iran, increase the need for a discussion of an update of the war objectives with a comprehensive view of the arenas and the connections between them. So what are these changes that he is proposing? In Gaza, he says that he wants to establish a reality without military threat, preventing the enhancement of terror capabilities, securing the return of all hostages, and promoting an alternative to Hamas rule. In Lebanon, he wants to create a security situation that allows residents of the north, which means like in Israel, northern Israel, settlements to return to their homes as soon as possible. And for Iran, it is deterrence and keeping Iran out of the war. And finally, for the West Bank, preventing violent outbreaks by thwarting terrorism. In response, Netanyahu's office said Minister Gallant's letter is quite puzzling. There is one compass, which is the war objectives as determined by the Security Cabinet. The objectives are constantly being evaluated and were recently expanded. So there is a disagreement between Gallant and Netanyahu over the war strategy in these different fronts. They want to keep Iran out of direct confrontation with Israel. At the same time, they want to create a new political establishment in the Gaza Strip and keep it separated basically from West Bank. And in West Bank, they want to, let's say, try to counter what they call terrors. Well, these terrors are from the Palestinians. Imagine that the Israelis are building their settlements there and their settlers are attacking the Palestinians, but the Palestinians are considered here the terrorists. It's just an upside-down word. Anyways, and in Lebanon, he wants to for the Israeli settlers to return to the north of the Israel, current Israel, or in northern Palestine. In any ways, I think that those are almost the same goals that they have set since October the 7th and October the 8th. And it has proven to be unattainable, basically, because they have thought that by decapitating the leadership of Hezbollah, they could create this shock among the hierarchy of Hezbollah, and they succeeded for a few weeks. And then later they assassinated the possible, let's say, potential successor of Nasrallah himself. And now today, Hezbollah again, they have elected a new Secretary General, which I'm going to tell you later in this stream. In any case, Israel's strategy is multifolded, and they have multiple goals to achieve. I don't think the liberation of the hostages and the prisoners of war is of priority for Prime Minister Netanyahu. However, I think also the military personnel in the Israeli occupation forces, some of which are the likes of Gallant, I think they would be frustrated now with the heavy losses they are receiving in Lebanon and the expansion of the war into Lebanon in terms of the ground offensive or the invasion of southern Lebanon. The numbers of the Merkavas that the Israelis have lost, I think now around 50 Merkavas. So if every Merkava has only 2 personnel, they have lost between 100 soldiers only in the Merkavas between dead and injured. At the same time, this situation where the Israeli occupation forces are facing fierce resistance from Hezbollah and the Lebanese fighters there, the Israeli occupation army comes and says that the military goals in Lebanon have been achieved. So the government can promote diplomatic resolution. And this has to be seen in the context of the failure of Israel in southern Lebanon. And the Israeli occupation forces, they are claiming that its military goals in Lebanon have been achieved and that the Israeli government can now promote a diplomatic resolution to end the conflict in the north. According to Northern Command, most of the Hezbollah terror infrastructure near the Lebanese-Israel border has been destroyed, and most of the weapons have been transferred to Israel or destroyed in the field. I think this is a big claim, unverifiable claim, and I 99% believe it's false. We have heard 2-3 days after the Israeli bombardment of southern Lebanon in 1.5-2 months ago that they have destroyed 60% of Hezbollah's missile capabilities, and since then Hezbollah has been firing on average 100 missiles and rockets, including also drones, and the attempt of the assassination against Netanyahu. So I think all these claims are false, and they are intended to give an opportunity to something else. And this is something that is, in my opinion, a plot, a conspiracy against Lebanon by trying to portray the situation in southern Lebanon that the Israelis have achieved their goals and they want to withdraw from southern Lebanon now. But there is a plot, there is a trick in it. I'm going to explain to you what's the trick and why the Israelis are now promoting this line that is, oh, we achieved our goals and we want to withdraw from Lebanon now. According to the Jerusalem Post, they say that if a diplomatic resolution is not implemented, what is going to happen? So there are 2 scenarios according to the Israelis. The first scenario is the continuation of military pressure through ground maneuvers and airstrikes. I mean, they have tried this already. The second is continuation of military control of territory occupied by IDF in all of southern Lebanon, including a scenario in which the Israeli military will be required to expand operational control of the villages. I think the second one would be the most stupid decision they could take as Israeli command to stay in southern Lebanon. It will be a war of attrition. It will be an easy sitting ducks for Hezbollah forces to kill as many as Israeli forces. I think the first one is more realistic if they want to keep pressure on Hezbollah just by through, let's say, limited skirmishes into the Lebanese territories and sometimes airstrikes. So the Israeli occupation forces says that in any scenario, whether there is or isn't a diplomatic resolution with Lebanon, the occupation army will be required to present a model for enforcing calm in southern Lebanon. The question raised by the officers of the occupation forces is, will such enforcement be carried out from Israeli or Lebanese territory? I think this, if they are going to try to implement this strategy, the least blows they could receive is if they stay in the Israeli territories and try to do these limited skirmishes, as I said, or the airstrikes against Hezbollah. Now, Gallant, it seems that he's frustrated and he's keeping his mouth open nowadays. In the past week, there has been many statements by him. And this is again himself. He says that Hamas has ceased to operate as a military framework and that Hezbollah continues to absorb a series of blows. Its chain of command was eliminated, most of its rocket and missile force was destroyed, and its forces were struck and retreated from the borders. So according to him, Hezbollah cannot represent an effective tool in Iran's hand any longer. Let's see. Still, he stresses that not every goal can be achieved through military force. He says returning the hostages to their homes demands painful compromises. We must do this for the hostages, for the families, for the soldiers who fell for this goal, for the IDF's legacy, and in the name of the Jewish and national ethos. Gallant says that this is our responsibility. So this is the video that he spoke about, that not always a military solution they have to make some compromises. Let's take a look. So we will have to make painful concessions.
כי לא כל מטרה ניתן להשיג רק בפעולה צבאית. הכוח אינו תכלית הכל. בבואנו לממש את חובתנו המוסרית והערכית, להשיב את החטופים לביתם, נידרש לפשרות כואבות. נידרש לפשרות.
So he says that they have to make some painful compromises, but for who are they going to make these painful compromises? This is the serious question. And secondly, what is going to be the concessions like from the Israeli side? And what is he expecting from the Hezbollah side? Because all this talk about dealing with the Lebanese government is not fruitful, because the Lebanese government doesn't decide what Hezbollah has or can or cannot do. So if they want to talk with the Lebanese government to mediators and the Lebanese government with Hezbollah, then I think that this is going to take a really long time for them to reach to a certain agreement. And additionally, the Lebanese side is not interested in any sort of a military or ceasefire agreement until a ceasefire is reached in Gaza. Now, Gallant knows that the situation is dire in southern Lebanon, and he knows that Netanyahu is sending so many of his troops to their imminent death to Lebanon, and this expansion has probably been a miscalculation, right? So he was asked by a journalist about this, and this is an interesting video. He says the situation has become worse. There is more open fronts, a higher number of wounded and killed soldiers, so we are in need of more soldiers. So he was asked by a journalist apparently here, and this was translated by Al Jazeera to Arabic, and then we have the subtitles in English on the bottom side of the screen. Take a look.
هل ستدعم قانون التجنيد الجديد أو على الأقل ستمتنع عن معارضته؟ القضية ليست قضية سياسية، بل قضية أمنية وأخلاقية. ما عرضته في القراءة الأولى على القانون فالوضع بات أسوأ. هناك جبهة أكثر مفتوحة وعدد أكبر من الجنود المصابين، وللأسف عدد أكبر من الجنود القتلى، فنحن بحاجة لمزيد من الجنود.
So the situation has gotten worse for the Israeli occupation forces after the expansion of the conflict to Lebanon. And I just want to make sure the number of the Merkavas that the Israeli occupation forces have lost in the past days, because this won't be reported, by the way, on mainstream media, but we have reliable sources in Lebanon. And yes, so Hezbollah announced today targeting a Merkava tank at 12 noon time in Khiam, so leading to it burning and its crew dead and wounded. So 40 Merkavas in 29 days, not 50. Apologize for the wrong number. So 40 Merkavas lost by the Israeli occupation forces in 29 days. So over one Merkava tank per day. So we are speaking about at least 80 soldiers between wounded and killed. In addition, of course, to the big casualty rate in a tete-a-tete, let's say, war situations. The other day, I saw a report claiming that the number of the injured and killed, so injured and killed, those are not only the killed, is around 900 of Israel in southern Lebanon. And this is a huge number. If these reports are accurate, and I don't rule out that possibility, those are big numbers. And I don't think that the Israeli internal front would swallow this. Now, I told you that Gallant is frustrated, and the Israeli army is claiming that they have achieved their goal in southern Lebanon. and I think there is going to be something else in the region, and I might be wrong, but it seems that the Israelis want to shift their strategy from direct military confrontation with Hezbollah into something else. So in this case, for example, our friend in the Middle East Observer, he reported this. He says, Israel and the United States are holding talks to conclude a comprehensive deal under which Israel will cancel the expansion of its ground operations in southern Lebanon. And in return, the United States will support the imposition of a land, sea, and air embargo on Lebanon that would prevent Hezbollah from rearming. Call me a conspiracy theorist again. This is according to the channel 12 of Israel. I think this is where things are heading towards. What the Americans are going to do, in my opinion, are multifold strategy in Lebanon. First, they will impose an aerial and land and sea blockade on Lebanon. And they could do that they don't need a direct intervention to do that. They already have enough assets in Lebanon itself to keep an eye on the ports, for example. And because the Israeli occupation forces destroyed the main routes on the borders between Lebanon and Syria. And imagine the American ambassador in Lebanon, she intervened with the Lebanese government and told them not to repair these routes. So there are major highways between Syria and Lebanon, which have been destroyed, and the Lebanese government is not reconstructing them. So I think this is part of the strategy, right? If they can control the port and they can control the sea, basically what is coming in and what is going out, if they can destroy the major routes between Syria and Lebanon and then force the Lebanese government not to repair these routes, they are going to try to strangle Hezbollah by cutting its lifeline routes with Syria. Syria is a place where when the Lebanese people are bombed, they can resort and find a safe shelter in Syria. Syria is a place where the Syrian army gives tangible support to the Lebanese. Syria is a place where Hezbollah fighters came and gained combat experience. Syria is a place where the military research centers are dedicated not only for the Syrian army, but this knowledge is also shared with Hezbollah, and Hezbollah builds its own arsenal and its own weapon systems in southern Lebanon, thanks to the military research centers in Syria and also in Iran, right? So by cutting these routes between Syria and Lebanon, they are trying to block the access of Hezbollah into the weapon market, the logistical, the humanitarian, and also the geographical connectivity, let's say, linkage between Syria and Lebanon. So probably the Americans want to achieve the same goal, but through other means, because the ground offensive seems to be not going well for the Israelis, and they want to change this strategy into something more, I would say, on a more strategic level. They could also try to trigger civil strife in the country. I want you all to know something. Lebanon is probably one of the most infiltrated countries in the world in terms of the presence of CIA, MI6, and foreign intelligence operatives in the country. It has one of the biggest US embassies in the world. Nobody knows what are they doing in this compound. It has active British military personnel spying on Syria from the borders of Lebanon. And you have Israeli spies. It's completely chaos, right, in Lebanon. So what they would do, in my opinion, because they have displaced hundreds of thousands of Lebanese Muslim Shias who are from the grassroots of Hezbollah, and they have forced them to move and to other regions, and some of these regions are controlled by pro-American warlords from the Civil War era. So in order to create, let's say, a social instability. So if the Americans can control the seaports, if they can cut the supply lines with Syria, and if they can create social pressure from inside the country itself, they would try to strangle Hezbollah from all sides. This is, I think, the plan. The other thing that we have to know, I am fearful of assassinations in Lebanon, of a scenario that could lead into series of assassinations in Lebanon. For those who haven't followed the Lebanese case, let's say in 2004 and 2005, so in 2004, the pressure mounted because after the invasion of Iraq, the Americans came after Assad and they said, look, we have a list of demands. You either follow our dictates or you're next. And Assad said no. And so the Americans went to business. They want to weaken the Assad rule in the region. And one of the places where Assad the son and Assad the father had major influence was Lebanon, because they had a military presence in Lebanon to end the civil war. But then when the civil war was over, they stayed stationed in Lebanon, and they had their air defenses in Lebanon. They had their military in Lebanon. They had, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they had like around 40,000 Syrian forces inside Lebanon. So that's how they exerted their dominance over Lebanon. They have picked the Lebanese presidents, they have picked the officials in Lebanon, they have picked who can become a member of parliament and who not. And everybody was pro-Syria because Syria basically was like the full in charge de facto government of Lebanon itself. So what happened is in 2005, a series of assassinations started in Lebanon, including the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Rafiq al-Hariri, who was a famous political figure, very, let's say, loved, especially by the Sunni Muslims in Lebanon. And the Americans and the Israelis, the French, and their allies in Lebanon, they accused Syria of killing him, right? There was a huge bomb, like let's say an operation, which led into the bombing of his cars and convoys. So, of course, after now 20 years of this incident, they don't have a shred of evidence that Syria has done that. But this incident led to the withdrawal of the Syrian forces from Lebanon because the Americans triggered a color revolution called the Cedar Revolution in Lebanon after this assassination to kick out the Syrian forces, right? So I'm afraid of a similar scenario now in 2024, 2025, that there would be a series of assassinations against political and media figures close to the US. Those who are pro-US and they want to dismantle the weapons of Hezbollah, or they are outspoken against Hezbollah. So there are so many big mouths, let's say, in Lebanon, on Twitter, on Facebook, on TV outlets, 24/7, they are recycling anti-Hezbollah talking points, basically. And if one or multiple of these people are assassinated through false flag operations and they accuse Hezbollah, civil war would erupt like that. So I'm fearful of this situation. I'm fearful that the Americans are shifting the strategy from a ground invasion situation through the Israeli occupation forces into controlling the ports, destroying the supply lines with Syria, and to create an instability in the country or social strife or a civil war in order to force Hezbollah to fight in a domestic war instead of fighting an external war against the Israelis. This is probably, I'm being too conspiratorial here. Let me know your opinions about this. Guys, in the comments if you agree with me on this or not. And in any ways, this video will stay online, and I hope it never happens. And but if God forbid it happens, this clip would be there for the public to understand what could happen next. Now, because we're speaking about this situation, I think in parallel, the Americans are intimidating President Bashar al-Assad. They're telling him, now we are changing our strategy. We will control the port in Lebanon. We have destroyed the supply lines or the major routes between Syria and Lebanon. and we will try to cause social instability in the Lebanese society. But you have to be careful. If you try to deliver aid, military security aid to Hezbollah, despite our blockade and despite our attempts to limit it, we will come after you. And this has been said, this is in the same strategy, you see. This has been said only 2 days ago by an Israeli minister, and he is a member of the cabinet, war cabinet. So this has been in length written by the Cradle. Israeli minister threatens Bashar al-Assad, you are in danger. Israeli government minister and war cabinet member Gideon Saar threatened Syria's President Bashar al-Assad on 27th of October, warning that he will be in danger if his country continues to act as a conduit for Lebanese resistance movement Hezbollah. Saar, who rejoined Benjamin Netanyahu's government late last month, said during a conference that Tel Aviv missed an opportunity to collapse Assad's government, which was saved by Iran and Hezbollah. Now, you see, I've been talking about this for 14 years, and many of these so-called anti-imperialist figures, they have been calling me a conspiracy theorist for saying that the Israelis had an invested interest in removing Assad from power. And things have become so clear nowadays that you don't need even to explain to them any longer because it's there in front of their eyes, right? So the Israelis said they had a golden opportunity to remove him, but Hezbollah and Iran saved. Of course, it's not Iran or Hezbollah saved him, but this is the allegation. He says Syria must not be permitted under any circumstances to be a conduit for weapons supply from Iran to Hezbollah, the minister went on to say, adding that Israel must make clear to Assad that if he chooses to harm Israeli security in this manner, he places his regime in danger. Israel will not agree to Hezbollah's renewed buildup of power through Syria and will not agree to the opening of a front against it from Syrian territory, he said. Removing Assad from the Iranian axis will have far-reaching consequences for Israel's security. So, of course, this is just a comment quickly. Israel was heavily involved in supporting extremist groups against the Syrian government at the start of the US-led regime change war against Damascus, which began in 2011. So I think this is the strategy nowadays. Sending the Jordanian foreign minister to Syria was not a coincidence. I think this was 2 weeks ago or 10 days ago. He came to deliver an American-Israeli message to Assad. This was a message of intimidation. This was a message of threat to Assad, that the Americans and the Israelis are not going to be tolerating further support from Syria to Hezbollah. And I explained in another previous stream in length why Syria cannot do that, cannot and will not follow the dictates of the Americans, because he would be shooting his own leg. And Syria doesn't see itself as a country just independent from what's happening in the region. Syria sees itself as part of a broader region where an ongoing struggle of power is persisting in the past decades, and sees itself as part of a coalition of countries and non-state actors, that the fate of one is also dependent on the fate of others. I'm not saying in terms of vanishing a power, but in terms of the strength of this power. So Syria's strength in the region is also dependent on the strength of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah's strength in the region is dependent on Hamas. And all these powers' strengths are also dependent on Iran, and similarly with Yemen, for example. This is the case. Those are all different coalitions, network of state and non-state actors, who have established mutual interests among them, security, economic, etc. And although they act independently, but because there is an intersection or mutual grounds between them, there is also mutual actions between them in terms of the major struggle of power against the US. Now, the Syrians are not suicidal. They're not going to be like in 2003 and tell the Americans to, fuck off, because back then Syria was in the peak of its strength. Now Syria's economy is devastated. But they will try to maneuver, let's say, this intimidation, and they will keep their support for Hezbollah, because if the Americans succeed in, let's say, strangling Hezbollah or weakening it completely or destroying Hezbollah through the Israeli army, because the Israelis, in this case, the Israeli occupation forces are nothing but a tool for the Americans. I think that this is going to be a place where the Syrians would have gotten themselves in a big trouble. And that's why you see all these Arabic countries now, especially the pro-American, pro-Israeli countries like Jordan, UAE, Saudi Arabia, are whispering in the ears of Assad, trying to bring him into what they call the moderate Arab countries. So moderate Arab countries is a definition of countries who are aligned with the US and who are for normalization of relations with Israel. They call themselves the moderate Arabs, and they have been trying to do this for a long time. They have been trying to do this for almost 3 decades now with Assad the son. And this has failed. I don't know what's going to be the final outcome of it, because this is all dependent on the operational details of this conflict in southern Lebanon, in Gaza, in Syria, and what is going to be the reaction now of Iran. Do you think that Iran will retaliate now against Israel's, let's say, weak response or weak attack last week? I don't know, because there are major Iranian outlets and also some big generals, officers, commanders in the Iranian army say that Operation Promise 3 is on the way. I don't know. Let's see. So for those who don't know, guys, today Hezbollah has picked a new Secretary General. His name is Naim Qassem. So who is he? He was born in 1953 in Beirut, and his family originated from the village of Kafafila. He is from southern Lebanon. He holds a degree in chemistry, in French, and worked as a teacher there for years. In addition to natural sciences, he continued his religious studies in the seminary and obtained degree in jurisprudence and principles. He is considered one of the founding generation of cultural institutions and Shiite Islamic movements in Lebanon, part of which was part of the blocs that founded Hezbollah, such as the Lebanese Union of Muslim Students, in addition to his activity in the Amal movement, which was founded by Imam Musa Sadr. He was one of the founders of Hezbollah after the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982. He was elected to the Hezbollah Shura Council 3 times and assumed responsibility for various sectors, including the Executive Council, educational activities, and others. And for those who don't know, guys, the Secretary General of Hezbollah is elected by the Shura Council. So there are different members in the Shura Council, and they have the responsibility to elect the Secretary General, and they have picked and elected him. In 1991, he assumed the position of Deputy Secretary General of Hezbollah, who was back then was Abbas al-Musawi. He was assassinated and continued in the position until he was elected Secretary General of the party today. Naim Qassem managed the parliamentary work file of the Hezbollah bloc in the Lebanese parliament and governmental and institutional work during the past years. He has several political, cultural, and educational books on various topics, the most important of which is his book on Hezbollah's political and military experience. Following the occupation's assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, Naim Qassem came out in the course of the battle and sent various political, military, and field messages. So this is from the Lebanese sources close to Hezbollah. One of our channel's friends who has been our guest regularly on Syriana Analysis, Elijah Maginier, says that Hezbollah Secretary General, the new one, Naim Qassem, he advocated a more aggressive response to Israel than the late Hassan Nasrallah. I mean, we will see. Days will prove how competent he is to carry this heavy burden, because it's a huge responsibility nowadays. As we were mentioning, Yoav Gallant, the defense minister of Israel, he posted a new tweet today about the appointment of the new Secretary General. And he says that temporary appointment for not for long, so he's threatening him with assassination. I mean, this is the thing that Hezbollah is has suffered the most in the past weeks, and that is the Israeli success in assassinating the leadership, the military leadership and the Secretary General of Hezbollah. This was one of the successes of Israel in Lebanon. However, on the ground invasion part, they have still they failed. They literally failed. They are capable of occupying a village or an axis or a geography or part of the southern Lebanon, but they're unable to fix in these territories. So there is a difference between occupying a territory and raising your flag and staying there, right? So it's going to be really hard for the Israelis to continue occupying any territories, basically in southern Lebanon. That's why I explained in length for 40 minutes now why Israel is shifting its strategy and why they are going to give an window of opportunity for the Americans to impose a siege on Lebanon, maritime siege, land siege, and also cutting the supply lines of Syria with Syria and intimidating Bashar al-Assad into accepting a certain deal with the Americans. Probably they would offer him some sanctions relief or opening the Arabic countries to invest in Syria in exchange for Syria's abandoning of Hezbollah. I think this would be the offers that they give to Assad. One of the friends says Kevork needs to migrate the comments from YouTube to here Rumble. The word ban list is out of control now. Yeah, what can I do, my friend? I've been encouraging people to register to Rumble and follow also this podcast on Rumble, because at any moment this channel could also be deleted and deplatformed. And for those who are wondering, you don't have to watch all the streams on Rumble, but to register on Rumble and follow Syriana Analysis there, that would be great help for me as well. All the links are in the description below if you're wondering how to do. One of our friends says, Amir Weidman, he's from the Likud party. He says, Russia will pay the price for supporting enemies of Israel. Israel should be pushed to make mistakes in Syria in order to bring Russia into a fray. Oh, wow. I didn't know about this. Amir Weidman, I will check again this tweet because I want to save it. Weidman. To be honest with you, this is something important because it also proves my point that I was trying to make, that they're trying to... so let's see. Syria, I remember this guy. He was on Russia Today, right? So on Russia Today, I remember him. Anyways, I will try to write a long analysis of the situation, the summary of what I've been trying to explain in this stream, and post it on my X account soon. I inshallah, tomorrow I will try to make it happen. Few more things, guys. What's happening around the world? You see that with Israel and the uproar and outrage of the international public, basically, I'm not talking about the governments, and the pressure on the ICC mounted, because the ICC is obliged by now to issue arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant, and they have been postponing and postponing and postponing. Unlike it have taken them probably 5 weeks to issue arrest warrants against Putin, and now it takes them forever to issue an arrest warrant. But he was intending on issuing arrest warrant, and all of a sudden, look what happens. Bombshell. He's an Israeli guy, by the way. He says Karim Khan is allegedly a rapist. So this is according to Wall Street Journal. The orders against Netanyahu and Gallant are a diversion tactic by the Hague prosecutor from the accusations against him. According to the American newspaper, when Karim Khan was confronted with harassment allegations by his employee, he said he would leave his position, but instead threatened her and the witnesses. Within a few days, he announced his intention to act against Israel. An Israeli source says, the picture is becoming clearer. The prosecutor is trying to enlist the support of the global progressive left. What a big full of crap. Every time somebody does something right, they get accused of being a rapist. So Dimitri explains this in a perfect way. He says the ICC took just 3 weeks, not 5 even, 3 weeks to issue an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin. It has been more than 5 months since the ICC's chief prosecutor Karim Khan applied for arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant, and the 3-judge panel still has not adjudicated the application, so they didn't submit the application yet. Now we learned that one of the ICC judges who was taking an eternity to weigh Khan's application has been replaced, quote, on medical grounds. The replacement of that judge, who is from Romania, will likely delay Khan's application even further. The ICC is nothing but a tool of Western imperialism. It has been utterly discredited and ought to be dismantled. I mean, where is the lie, right? Where is the lie in this? It has taken them 3 weeks to issue an arrest warrant against Putin, and they have been waiting for 5 months now for Gallant, and rape allegations now pops up against him again. Our friend says, write this on YouTube. Russia will pay the price. Yeah. I remember the video, my friend. I think you're speaking about this. This was at the beginning of the conflict, right? And I think this is the one that you are speaking about. I will just quickly show you. This is the guy, right? This is the guy. Amir Weidman, an Israel's politician, foaming at the mouth and threatens Russia on RT. I think this is the guy who was threatening Russia. But this is not new, right? Like this has happened a few months ago. So Karim Khan himself made a statement, of course, refuting these allegations against him. There are only few people, in my opinion, they have taken a bold position on Israel. I'm speaking about the politicians and officials in the West. And one of which is the Spanish politician Lone Belara. She has been very outspoken in favor of the Palestinians. And I think that she's here taken her speech into a different level, making comparisons between Israel and you will see who, because I'm not even probably allowed to say the name on YouTube. And I think this will bring her into deep trouble, and she will be in big trouble soon, and accusations will be made against her. I'm sure they can't make rape accusations against her. But they are creative in making accusations. Take a look what she has to say in this case.
Yo creo que si queremos reconstruir, digamos, la confianza de la ciudadanía del mundo en el sistema de Naciones Unidas, por ejemplo, creo que va a ser fundamental repensar cómo funciona y ese poder de veto, eso es absolutamente imprescindible, pero creo que hay que tratar la cuestión palestina cada vez más como abordamos la cuestión de los nazis que como se abordó la cuestión de Sudáfrica. Por supuesto hay que hacer todos los elementos de presión, pero no se entendería, yo creo que si conseguimos frenar el genocidio y pararle los pies a Netanyahu, no se produzca, por ejemplo, un desmantelamiento de las capacidades militares de Israel. Creo que eso es una cosa que tiene que estar sobre la mesa, sin juicios de Nuremberg, sin justicia, sin que realmente haya una rendición de cuentas y una garantía de no repetición de lo que está pasando. Bueno, yo creo que eso es... O sea, que más allá de la narrativa del derecho a defenderse de Israel, que obviamente creo que hay que combatir, y las acusaciones de antisemitismo, que creo que en este año han ido perdiendo mucho fuelle, por lo menos en España, creo que hay que dar un paso más y exigir nuevas garantías para que no solo esto deje de suceder, sino que no vuelva a suceder nunca más.
So Israel keeps telling us that we all have to accept what Israel is doing in Gaza and Lebanon, because what happened on October 7 shouldn't be repeated. But what about what Israel is doing in against the Palestinians and the Lebanese? How can we make sure that what the Israelis are doing nowadays for the people of the region won't be repeated? So this is the point that she raises. And I think she's correct on the military aspect of it. If Israel doesn't dismantle its arsenal and the United States keeps sending them unlimited amount of weapons, cash, this is just going to be, this type of aggressions are just going to continue over and over again. She's spot on. No, she's not. So you can agree or disagree with her. I think that Israelis, as long as they receive this type of immunity, let's say, from the Americans, they will just continue doing what they do in the past years. One last thing I want to mention. Jimmy Dore was on Tucker Carlson's show, and I'm not going to show the video because there could be some, I don't know, copyright or something. He says, they say Trump is going to be worse. What's he going to do? Dig up the dead bodies and kill them again? If Trump is worse, then we deal with Trump when that happens. But right now, you cannot reward what the Democratic administration is doing. I agree. Look, this is not a criticism of Jimmy Dore. You know, I love Jimmy Dore. But the last part of his sentence is correct. I mean, if anyone who is pro-Palestinian or even pro-human and he or she still votes for the Democratic Kamala Harris, they are not only complicit, they are partners now in the Israeli big crime against the Palestinians. I think the information has become publicized, and there is no excuse for anyone to say we didn't know what's happening in Gaza or in Lebanon or in Syria or. I think rewarding Kamala Harris would be a horrible, horrible thing. I totally agree with her. However, I also think that Trump is not going to be any better than Kamala Harris when it comes to the conflict in the Middle East. I think that Trump is going to be probably supporting, not probably, for sure, 100% supporting Israel the same way Kamala Harris is doing, because this has nothing to do with the president. This is about the deep state in the US. This is about the bankers. This is about the military-industrial complex. This is an American strategy that whoever is the president will continue. This is about AIPAC. There's so many influential people in the US. And I think that if you follow the recent events of the Republicans and the moronic way of supporting Israel, it's like they're trying to prove that they're more pro-Israel than the Democrats. It's insane. I think that the Republicans' biggest flex against the biggest, let's say, criticism against the Democrats would be their unlimited support of Israel in Palestine, in Lebanon, and how they have destroyed these two beautiful places. But they are just telling the opposite of the truth. And that is, Kamala Harris is not supporting Israel enough, and when we come to power, we will do even more. This is just a deranged, stupid strategy. And there are many people, one of the lights just turned off all of a sudden to my face. It's just, it shows you the state of affairs in the US, and it shows you that whoever comes, Democrat, Republican, it's just going to be the same when it comes to Israel. It could be better of course, in Ukraine. But I tried to explain this again, over and over again, why they want to freeze the conflict in Ukraine. It's not going well. If you see the front lines in the east of Ukraine, the Ukrainian front lines have completely collapsed. And the mainstream media is now talking about the survival of Ukraine, not the victory of Ukraine. So things are very desperate in Ukraine. I think Trump will try to freeze the conflict in Ukraine to focus on the Middle East, to harm Iran and by extension China, because he cannot go to war against China, because Iran and China are becoming strategic partners, and the biggest oil importer of Iran is China. So I think that the Americans want to score a point in the Middle East before it's too late, before it's officially a multipolar world. And the only place they think they can achieve a military victory is in the Middle East, to secure the security of Israel completely by annihilating the Palestinians, by annihilating the Lebanese resistance, and coming after Assad. This is why Trump or Kamala Harris is not going to make any difference in the Middle East. If you support Trump and you disagree with this, you have all the right to disagree with me, but days will prove, and we will remember this stream, and you will see when it happens how Trump is going to be a big Zionist president and supporter of Israel in an unconditional way. And then some people will try to find excuses because they have voted for Trump. But I'm here to tell you the truth from my perspective, but you are free to do whatever you want, and you're free to vote to whoever you want. I'm not going to tell you who to vote, but the American establishment and the political class is so corrupted that whoever comes, it's not going to make any difference in terms of sensitive strategic issues such as the Israeli issue. Guys, while you're watching, this has turned on again. The light is just, I hope that it doesn't fall over my face now. Guys, I would really, again, I would like to thank you all before this light blows up to my face and it comes again. And for tuning into today's live streaming. If you like this type of content, please hit the like button before leaving this live streaming. I would really appreciate that. And I will come and make a Q&A session tomorrow, Wednesday, 5 p.m. Central European time. I don't know what time is it now in the US. I think 11 or 12 in the morning. So stay tuned for that. Tomorrow is a Q&A day. So stay tuned and post your questions in advance. And if you'd like to support my independent work, the link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And I will see you tomorrow. Peace be upon you. Salam.